Before I dive into how everything unraveled, let me share something you should understand. There's nothing more agonizing than giving all you have and still being told it isn't enough. Sometimes the most painful wounds come from those you raised, the ones who once held your hand as children but now can't even look you in the eye. I was only trying to help, but in doing so, I lost everything. Stick with me until the end, and you'll see why walking away turned out to be the best decision I ever made. And hey, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and let me know where you're watching from. It was early March in Ohio, still cold enough that your breath formed visible clouds in the morning air, but not so cold that you were confined to the indoors all day. I remember it well because I was out in the garden, deadheading the last of the frostbitten mums when the phone rang. It was Brian. His voice was soft, almost too careful. "Hey, Mom. How are you doing?" I hadn't heard from him in over 3 weeks, but that wasn't unusual. Since his marriage to Tiffany, our calls had become less frequent, shorter, polite, but distant. I told him I was fine, keeping busy with the yard and sorting through some of Harold's old things. That was a lie. I hadn't touched Harold's closet since the funeral. Just the smell of his old jackets would bring me to my knees, but Brian didn't need to know that. "You've been alone for a while now," he said. I don't like the idea of you rattling around in that big old house by yourself." I laughed nervously. "I've managed. It's quiet, but it's home." Then came the pause. That hesitation in his voice, the kind that told me what was coming next, had already been rehearsed. "I was talking with Tiffany and, well, we think maybe you should come live with us for a while." My heart skipped a beat. "Live with you?" "Yeah, it would be good for the kids. They miss you and we've got that spare room. You know you wouldn't be in the way." I didn't respond immediately. Something about it felt off. Not bad, just unexpected. The last time I visited, Tiffany barely spoke 2 sentences to me. She was always on her phone, always somewhere else. And Brian, he looked tired, thinner than usual, with sunken eyes like he hadn't slept in days. But the thought of being closer to my grandchildren stirred something inside me. Maybe I was being foolish, letting my loneliness drown out my better judgment. "I'll think about it," I told him. I sat with the idea for a week. I walked through my empty house, past the family photos collecting dust, the old armchair where Harold used to nap, the teacups I hadn't touched in months. I thought about the nights I'd cooked dinner for one and left the TV on just to have another voice in the room. And then I made up my mind. I packed a suitcase, just enough for a long stay. I left my house the way I found it. Quiet, a little sad, but still standing. With a heavy heart and cautious hope, I drove to Brian's house, 2 towns over. When I arrived, no one came out to greet me. Tiffany opened the door after I knocked twice. She didn't smile. "You're early," she said, stepping aside. The house smelled of takeout and diapers. Toys were scattered on the floor, and the TV blared a cartoon I didn't recognize. Brian came down the stairs, the baby on his hip, and gave me a quick hug. It was too quick, like he was trying to rush through it. The boys barely looked up from their toys as he pointed toward the guest room. "We cleared it out for you," he said. "It's not perfect, but it's something." I stepped inside and my heart sank. It wasn't cleared out at all. Boxes were piled everywhere. A broken lamp sat in the corner, and an air mattress lay deflated in place of a bed. There was no closet, no place for my things. I forced a smile. "It'll do," I said softly, trying to convince myself. That night, I spent hours lying on the air mattress, staring up at the ceiling. The sounds of a house I didn't belong to filled my ears, and the unease in my chest grew. I tried to tell myself this was just temporary, that I was needed here, that this was what family did for one another. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had walked into something that had very little to do with my loneliness and everything to do with their needs. I didn't know it yet, but I had just entered a slow, quiet kind of betrayal. It wasn't the kind that breaks you all at once. It chips away at you, day by day, until there's nothing left to give. The days that followed were filled with small silences and subtle dismissals. I tried to be helpful, offered to cook, to clean, to watch the boys while Tiffany scrolled endlessly on her phone or disappeared upstairs for hours. But nothing I did seemed to land the way I hoped. Tiffany barely looked at me. When she did, her expression was a mix of forced politeness and quiet irritation. Brian was always busy, either working late, pacing the kitchen on tense phone calls, or retreating into the garage with a beer in hand. I asked him once if everything was okay, and he gave me a half-hearted smile that didn't reach his eyes. We're just stretched thin, Mom. You know how it is. 2 kids, bills, work, it's a lot. I nodded. I did know. I'd raised him through tougher years than this, with far less. But I didn't say that. I just kept smiling, kept offering to help in whatever way I could. Then one morning, Tiffany stopped me in the hallway. Hey, do you mind not using the washer during the day? The electric bill's been really high. I blinked, taken aback. Of course, I didn't realize. I only did 1 load. It's fine, she cut me off, walking away before I could finish. Another time, she sighed when I left the bathroom light on too long. Then came the complaints about the heating and the water. Every small thing I did, folding the kids' clothes, sweeping the floor, even buying groceries, seemed to be met with quiet judgment. And then the bills started coming. Brian brought it up casually one evening over dinner while the boys were half asleep at the table. I know it's a little awkward, he said, avoiding my gaze, but things are tight right now. If you could maybe help with the hypotheca, just until we get caught up, I'd really appreciate it. I looked at him, stunned. Of course, I said almost automatically. Just tell me what you need. That same week, I dipped into my savings and transferred enough money to cover half the monthly payment, thinking it would be a one-time thing. But the next month, he asked again. And the month after that, it became expected, not requested. I didn't protest. I wanted to help. I told myself that's what mothers do. But deep down, I started to feel like a line had been crossed. Not by the request itself, but by the coldness with which it was made. I began to notice things I hadn't before. Brian's phone buzzing late at night, his quick shift to another screen when I passed behind him at the kitchen counter. Tiffany's shopping bags from stores I knew weren't cheap, despite her constant complaints about money. And always, the tension hanging in the air, heavy, invisible, suffocating. One evening, I made a roast, the kind Brian used to love when he was little. I thought it might bring back some warmth, some connection. But it was clear by the way the night went that the cracks were too wide to fill with food. I set the table, even folding napkins, just like I used to at home. I thought this might be my way of reconnecting, of softening the edges of the space between us. But Tiffany didn't come downstairs until we had already finished eating. She glanced at the plate I had saved for her, looked at me, and said, "Next time, just ask. I don't really eat red meat." She didn't touch the food I had made. Instead, she grabbed a protein bar from the pantry and went back upstairs. I sat there long after everyone had left, staring at the untouched roast, the silence pressing down around me. The dishwasher hummed in the background. I wasn't wanted here. I was useful, sure. A wallet, a babysitter, a maid, but I stayed because I loved them. I still thought I could make it work. But the walls were already cracking, and I hadn't realized yet how little I was truly seen. The moment that would shatter everything was coming, just around the corner. And it would come from the one person who had always made me feel invisible. It happened on a Thursday. The boys were cranky that day, too much screen time, too little fresh air. Tiffany hadn't left the bedroom, and Brian had been glued to his laptop in the kitchen since early morning. I spent most of the day trying to calm tantrums, cleaning up spilled juice, and folding laundry that wasn't mine. By dinner, I was exhausted. I made a chicken casserole, the kind that feeds a family and leaves enough for leftovers. I set the table like always, called everyone down, and tried to pretend like this was normal, that I belonged here. Tiffany sat across from me, scrolling through her phone between bites. Brian chewed in silence, his eyes fixed on the screen of his laptop, which was propped beside his plate. The kids bickered, poked at their food, and eventually got up without finishing. Trying to make conversation, I gently said, if we all sat together more often for meals, maybe the boys would eat better. Tiffany didn't even look up. Brian cleared his throat. "We're just a little overwhelmed, Mom." That's when Tiffany raised her head. Her voice was flat, but tinged with something sharp beneath the surface. "You're always making little comments, Maggie, Like we don't know how to run our own house. I blinked. I didn't mean it like that. She cut me off, setting her fork down with a loud clink. You do a lot of talking for someone who doesn't actually contribute enough to be making suggestions. The words landed like a slap. The air seemed to leave the room. Brian didn't say anything. He just looked down at his plate. I stared at them both, frozen. My hands trembled under the table. I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. In that moment, I realized something I'd been denying for weeks. I wasn't part of this family. I was a burden dressed up as a helper, a placeholder until they could breathe again. Someone to use, not someone to honor. I got up without finishing my meal, took my plate to the sink, and rinsed it in silence. My heart thudded painfully in my chest as I walked down the hallway to the makeshift room they'd cleared for me. I sat on the edge of the air mattress and stared at the floor for a long time. That night, I didn't sleep. I thought of all the years I'd held Brian through emotional storms, of the nights I'd gone hungry to feed him, of the sacrifices I made without ever being asked. And now, I wasn't contributing enough. After paying half their hypotheca, cooking their meals, cleaning their house, loving their children, still, it wasn't enough. By morning, something inside me had shifted. The silence at breakfast was thick. Tiffany avoided my gaze, her eyes darting away as if pretending nothing had happened. Brian acted like everything was fine, like nothing had shifted in the air between us. I didn't speak. I couldn't, not without breaking down, and I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry. So, I went back to the guest room, zipped up my suitcase, and began folding the few clothes I had brought from my real home. The one I should have never left. Then I saw it. Outside the bedroom door, propped against the hallway wall, was another suitcase, already packed, already waiting. It was as if they knew, as if this moment had been decided for me the second Tiffany spoke those cruel words. A part of me cracked, but deeper inside, something else hardened. I was done. They didn't know it yet, but they were about to lose more than just their housekeeper, their unpaid nanny, or their emergency fund. They were about to lose the one person who would have done anything to protect them. And I would make sure they felt every ounce of that loss. I didn't say goodbye. I wanted to, especially to the boys. But I couldn't bring myself to wake them. They were innocent in all of this. They didn't choose to treat me like I was disposable. But I knew if I saw their sleepy eyes, their little hands reaching for one more hug, I wouldn't be able to leave. So I didn't. Instead, I left a note on the kitchen counter, just one line written in neat cursive, the kind I learned in Catholic school. Thank you for having me. With my suitcase in hand, I walked out the front door just after sunrise. No one noticed. No one stopped me. Brian didn't come down the stairs. Tiffany didn't peek from the bedroom. The silence in that house spoke volumes, confirming everything I already knew. As I drove away, the road ahead blurred through the tears I tried so hard to hold back. Not because I regretted leaving, but because I regretted ever believing I belonged there. I pulled into my own driveway just past 8 a.m. The house stood like a forgotten promise, slightly sagging, a little dusty, but still mine. Still waiting for me. I opened the front door and was greeted by the scent of old air and the silence that echoed through every room. I walked through the house, touching the furniture as if it might vanish beneath my fingers. My wedding photo with Harold still sat on the fireplace mantel. Our bed was still made, the sheets he had slept on still neatly folded. My slippers were exactly where I had left them. And in that moment, I felt foolish for leaving, for thinking I could find comfort anywhere else. Before unpacking, I sat down at the kitchen table and opened my banking app. I scrolled to the automatic transfers, those recurring payments I had set up to help with Brian and Tiffany's hypotheca. My heart pounded in my chest as I stared at the transactions, and then, with one click, I began to cancel them. Click, click, click. Each one went away. And as I sat there listening to the silence settle around me like a heavy blanket, I felt a strange sense of relief. That afternoon, I received a text from Brian. Hey, just wanted to check if you made it home okay. I didn't reply. 2 hours later, another message. I know things got weird, but maybe we could talk soon. Still, I said nothing. By nightfall, the phone rang. I let it go to voicemail. No apology, no acknowledgement of Tiffany's harsh words, just concern that his safety net had walked out the door. I heated up a frozen meal and sat at my own table for the first time in months. I didn't eat much, but every bite tasted like the kind of pride I hadn't felt in years. They thought they could dismiss me, like I was some old, worn-out couch, too faded to be useful anymore. But they made one big mistake. They thought I would stay quiet. They had no idea what losing me would cost them. And I was only starting to realize the value they'd overlooked. The next time I heard from them, it wouldn't be a casual check-in. It would be a desperate cry for help. The first week back home felt like waking up from a long, aching dream. I cleaned every room from top to bottom, not because it needed it, but because I needed it. I needed to take back control of the space, to remind myself that I existed outside of their expectations, that I had a life before I became their solution. Even with the windows wide open and the sun warming the hardwood floors, the silence was suffocating. I missed the boys, their laughter, their tiny hands tugging at my sleeve. I missed their messy questions and the unexpected hugs they'd give me. I didn't miss Tiffany's glares or Brian's passive indifference, but the kids, that hurt. A few days later, I found myself buying them a gift. I know what you're thinking. They didn't deserve it. Maybe not, but the boys did. They had no idea what their parents had done, no idea what had been said behind closed doors, or what it felt like to be discarded by your own son. So I ordered 2 new iPads, preloaded them with educational games and drawing apps, and added soft leather cases to each, navy blue for Jake and forest green for Liam. I wrapped them carefully, wrote a handwritten note, and even paid extra for overnight delivery. The note said, "Even when I'm far away, I'm always right here. Love, Grandma." No response came from Brian. No text, no thank you. Nothing from Tiffany, of course, but I knew they'd received the packages. I had tracking confirmation. A week later, I saw the boys on Tiffany's Instagram story. They were playing with the iPads, grinning ear to ear. Tiffany hadn't tagged me, hadn't mentioned me, but I saw the smiles. That was enough for now. Then came the silence again. I busied myself with puzzles, books, and long walks around the block. I didn't cry, not out loud, but every time I passed the hallway where Harold's coat still hung, I felt my throat tighten. And then one night, out of nowhere, I woke up with a strange pit in my stomach. Something told me to check my finances. I hadn't thought much about it since canceling the transfers, but I logged into my bank anyway and found nothing out of the ordinary. What did catch my eye, though, was an email alert from 2 months prior, one I hadn't opened in the chaos of moving. It was from my bank. A notification of a large withdrawal Brian had made. Money that hadn't gone to the Hipoteca. My heart raced. I dug deeper, pulling up old statements. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I knew something was wrong. The numbers didn't add up. There were repeated charges for a company I didn't recognize. A vague name. I Googled it. It was a gambling site. I stared at the screen, stunned. Over a dozen charges, spread out over weeks. Hundreds of dollars each time. Sometimes just days apart. All while I was under their roof. All while he was telling me how tight things were. While he let his wife belittle me. While I paid his bills. It hit me like a punch to the gut. He didn't just use me. He lied to me, not by omission, but with full knowledge that he was funneling my money into a hole he couldn't crawl out of. And worse, he didn't even ask for help. He hid it, buried it under fake politeness and long silences. That night, I sat in the living room, lights off, the blue glow of the computer screen casting shadows on the walls. I thought of every time I believed I was helping him, supporting him, saving him. And then I realized I was drowning myself to keep his head above water. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, numb. And for the first time in my life, I felt something I had never felt toward my own child. Resentment. Not the sharp, immediate kind, but the slow, acidic kind that gnaws at your ribs. The kind of resentment that comes from knowing your love was weaponized. In that moment, I knew things would never be the same between us again. The next morning, I woke up feeling different. Not like myself. Not the version of me who excused, softened, or looked the other way. I felt sharper, colder, like something inside me had finally snapped back into alignment after years of being dislocated. I didn't text Brian. I didn't confront him. What was the point? He'd just deny it, minimize it, and blame stress, Tiffany, or life in general. I knew how that dance went. I'd watched Harold do the same thing with his own secrets more times than I cared to count. But this wasn't about Harold. This was about me. I opened a new savings account that day, one Brian couldn't touch. I transferred everything I had left, closed the old account, and canceled the card I had once handed to him just in case. I deleted every automatic payment that had his name attached to it. Then, I changed the locks on my front door. It was dramatic, I knew that. But it felt right. Like a ritual, a way of sealing the space between the woman I used to be and the woman I was becoming. The call came a week later. At first, it was just Brian. Casual check-ins. Just wanted to say hi, miss the boys. But I heard the tension in his voice, the subtle edge that told me he wasn't calling just to chat. Then the question started. Hey, did the bank call you? Something weird happened with my account. I think there's been a mistake with the Hipoteca. Did you maybe forget to? I didn't answer. I let every call go to voicemail. The text stacked up like unpaid bills. Tiffany says you changed your number. Are you okay? You've been acting strange. Can we just talk? Please. No, we couldn't. I watched from a distance as the cracks in their perfect little world deepened. Tiffany started posting fewer photos. When she did, her smile looked tired, forced. The kids' clothes appeared older. The backgrounds messier. The tone shifted. I could tell the money was running out. Then came the real sign. The one that hit me like a vindication I didn't even know I wanted. A letter from the bank addressed to me by mistake, or maybe on purpose, since I'd once co-signed something I barely understood. Pre-foreclosure notice. I stared at the word delinquent like it was branded in fire. That same night, Brian called again. I didn't answer. He texted instead. I know you're upset, but Mom, we need help. Just this once, please. No apology. No acknowledgement of the gambling, the lies, the betrayal. Just desperation. And I'll admit it, a part of me ached to fix it, to make everything right. To be the mother who swoops in, who saves the day, who earns back her worth through sacrifice. But that part of me was dying, starved by years of one-sided giving. Instead, I sat down and wrote a letter, not to Brian, not to Tiffany, but to myself. I listed everything I'd given, every bill I'd paid, every favor, every ride, every meal, every sacrifice. Then beneath it I wrote, and still it wasn't enough. That sentence stared back at me like a verdict. It was the truth. And finally, I was done trying to rewrite it. They were about to learn what life looked like without me. And I was about to learn what life looked like when I chose myself first. I disappeared. Not physically. I was still in my home, still walking the same streets, still buying my groceries at the same corner store. But emotionally, digitally, spiritually, I vanished. I shut down Facebook, blocked Brian's number, changed my email, turned off notifications for everything. I needed silence. Not the heavy, painful kind I'd lived with since Harold died, but a new kind. Clean silence. The kind that makes space for something better. I started small. A walk every morning. Just 20 minutes through my neighborhood, past the same mailboxes, barking dogs, and hedges I'd seen 1,000 times before. But with each step, I began to feel something shift, a quiet strength growing within me. But now, with fresh eyes, the air felt different, colder, crisper, like it held more truth in it, like it could slice through the layers of denial. That's when I signed up for therapy. Not because I was broken, though maybe I was, but because I needed someone to talk to who wouldn't manipulate me, guilt me, or demand anything from me. I cried through the first 3 sessions. I hadn't cried in front of another human being in years. I told her everything, the quiet selfishness of Harold, Brian's growing distance, Tiffany's disdain, the time I overheard Tiffany mocking my clothes to a friend on speakerphone, the meals they never thanked me for, the way Brian used to call me Mama when he needed something and Ma when he didn't want to talk. I told her about paying for his childhood, his college, his first car, his wedding suit, and now his hypotheca, unknowingly fueling his addiction while being told I wasn't enough. My therapist didn't say much, but she looked at me, really looked, and somehow that was everything. Next, I pulled my old sewing machine out of the attic. I hadn't touched it since before Harold got sick. Back when I used to make costumes for school plays, Halloween outfits for Brian, and pillows for the church bazaar. I dusted it off, oiled the joints, and started stitching again. At first, it was just mending old towels and worn shirts. But soon, I was making tote bags, aprons, and custom baby blankets. I set up an online store, nothing big, nothing flashy, just mine. And people bought them. Strangers sent me thank you messages, asked for more, paid full price, and told me my stitching reminded them of their own grandmothers. For the first time in years, I felt valued. Not as a mother, not as a helper, not as a wallet, but as me. One afternoon, I opened a new journal. The pages were crisp and untouched. I wrote across the first line in thick black ink, I am not a burden. I am not invisible. I am not disposable. And beneath that, I added, I am a woman who deserves peace. It became my mantra. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. I didn't need to because slowly I was becoming someone I hadn't been in a long time. Not just someone who survived, but someone who thrived. And meanwhile, the world I'd left behind began to unravel. I didn't hear from Brian for over 3 weeks. Not a word. No texts. No calls. No last-ditch apologies. At first, the silence was strange, eerie even, but it wasn't painful. It was just quiet, like the ringing in your ears after a fire alarm stops. You don't realize how loud it was until it's gone. But then, slowly, signs of their unraveling started to surface. Subtle, like smoke slipping under a closed door. Tiffany's Instagram began to change. She used to post carefully curated photos, matching outfits for the boys, latte art, new home decor, all bright filters and wide smiles. Suddenly, there were fewer pictures. The captions got shorter. The smiles disappeared. And then nothing. I checked once a week just to see. Call it curiosity. Call it concern. I told myself it wasn't spite. I just needed to know how far the echo of my absence had traveled. One afternoon, while scrolling through the local neighborhood app, I saw a listing, gently used sectional sofa. Must pick up. Urgent. It was their couch. I recognized the throw pillows. A week later, brand name handbags for sale. DM for details. Then the car. Tiffany's SUV, the one she refused to let anyone else drive, was gone from the driveway in a photo posted by someone else. In its place was a dented old sedan. Their image was fading. The polish was stripped away. The next time I went into town, I saw Brian at the grocery store alone. He didn't see me, or maybe he pretended not to. He was wearing the same hoodie I had sewn a patch onto 3 winters ago. His cart was filled with generic cereal, frozen pizza, baby wipes, nothing special. No steaks, no wine, no organic anything. He looked tired, pale, and hollow. I watched him from behind a display of canned soup. And for one fragile moment, something in me wanted to walk up to him, say hello, ask how the boys were, offer to help. But then I remembered Tiffany's voice, crisp, cutting. You don't contribute enough to be making suggestions. So I let him pass. That night, I cooked myself a real meal, not frozen or microwaved. I lit a candle, poured a glass of wine, and set the table with the good plates just for me. The house was warm, safe, peaceful. Then, on Christmas Eve, there was a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I peeked through the window. No car in the driveway. A delivery box sat on my porch, large, wrapped in brown paper. Inside were 2 smaller packages. One addressed to Grandma, the other to Mimi, the nickname Liam had started calling me when he was still learning to speak. My breath caught in my chest. Inside were the same iPads I had sent them weeks ago, carefully wrapped again, but now decorated. Stickers, glitter. One of them had a note written in big, childish handwriting, "We miss you. Merry Christmas. Come back soon." I sat on the floor and wept. Not for Brian, not for Tiffany, but for the children, for what they were caught in, for what they didn't understand. I wanted to run to them, to hold them, and tell them none of this was their fault. But instead, I walked to the hallway closet, pulled out 2 new jackets I had bought on clearance and never mailed, and began packing another box. I filled it with love disguised as essentials, gloves, books, warm socks, small toys, and another note. A grandma's love doesn't need permission. It's always yours. I dropped it at the post office the next morning. No return address, no expectation, just love with boundaries, because they had to learn. I wouldn't disappear, but I also wouldn't be their foundation anymore. They would have to rebuild it themselves. Christmas came and went in a way I hadn't experienced in years. Quiet. Still mine. I decorated the tree alone, hung Harold's favorite ornament near the top, and lit a single candle by his photo on the mantel. I didn't cook a feast. I just baked my mother's cinnamon bread, the one she used to make on snowy mornings, and let the scent fill the house. There was no shouting, no chaos, no scrambling to impress guests who didn't care. There was only peace, but even peace has its shadows. I missed the boys. I missed the sound of their laughter bouncing off the walls, the way Jake would curl into me on the couch like a cat, the way Liam would try to say words too big for his mouth. I wondered what kind of Christmas they were having. The answer came a few days later, wrapped in Instagram silence and one text from Brian. Hope you had a good holiday, Mom. No, we missed you. No, the boys asked about you. Just that one cold sentence. But I already knew what kind of holiday they'd had. You could see it in the absences, no Christmas photos, no matching pajamas, no decorated tree. And then I saw it. A local classified post on the day after Christmas, urgent. Looking for part-time babysitting. Flexible hours. Must be reliable. Background check required. The poster was Tiffany. My heart squeezed and swelled at the same time. They needed help. Not a handout. Not anymore. They needed support. Structure, stability, things I had once provided like clockwork, like breath, without ever being thanked for. I could have called. I could have reached out. But I didn't. Instead, I did something else. I sent another package to the boys. This one was carefully thought out, filled with warmth and love. Inside, there were warm winter coats, handmade scarves, new books, and small wooden toys. But there was something extra, something more personal, 2 framed photos. One of me with Jake, the other with Liam, taken the last time we made cookies together. The smiles in those photos were real, pure. The joy was whole. And then there was one final envelope addressed to Brian and Tiffany. Inside was a card with a watercolor painting of a tree shedding its leaves on the front. On the inside, in my own handwriting, I wrote, "Love isn't alone. Respect isn't optional, and help isn't forever." No signature, no threats, just the truth. Days passed, then a week. Then, one afternoon, my doorbell rang. I opened the door to find a box on my porch. No return label. Inside, wrapped in brown paper and Scotch tape, were the 2 photo frames I had sent. But the coats and books were gone. And on the back of the card I had written, there was a new line added in Brian's handwriting. "We understand. We'll figure it out." I stood there for a long time, holding the card, heart thudding in my chest. He was starting to get it. Not fully. Not yet, but the cracks were turning into reflection. The next step would be painful for him, for Tiffany, for the boys. But I wouldn't interfere. Sometimes, love means stepping far enough back so they can fall and finally learn how to stand on their own. The call came on a Tuesday evening. I was folding laundry, the kind of task that fills silence without drawing attention to itself. My phone buzzed across the counter. I almost didn't answer, but something inside me urged me to. "Mom," Brian's voice came through, thick with exhaustion. "Please, I need to see you." There was no bitterness, no guilt, just something I hadn't heard in years. Honesty. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just told him I'd be home the next day if he wanted to stop by. After 3 p.m. That evening, I heard the sound of tires crunching on the gravel of my driveway. I peeked out the window and saw his car. Not the old SUV, but a compact sedan that looked either borrowed or bought on the cheap. He walked up the steps slowly, like his body was heavier than it used to be. When I opened the door, I barely recognized him. He had lost weight. His eyes were sunken, his cheeks pale. The confident slouch he'd picked up after marrying Tiffany was gone, replaced with something raw, stripped. "Can I come in?" he asked. I hesitated for just a second, then stepped aside. He sat on the edge of the couch like it might reject him, his hands folded in his lap, wringing them together. "I messed up," he said. "You don't need to say it," I replied softly. "I already know." I stayed silent as he looked around my house like he was seeing it for the first time. The worn armchair, the stack of books on the coffee table, the candle still flickering on the mantel. "I didn't realize how peaceful it was here," he said quietly. Still, I didn't speak. And then he broke. "I'm in trouble, Mom," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I think I'm addicted to online betting." I tried to stop, I swear I did. But every time I felt overwhelmed, I'd pick up the phone. And Tiffany, she doesn't understand. She just wants the money back. That's all she ever talks about. He paused, choked on his words. I ruined everything. The house is behind on payments. The kids ask why there's no heat some nights. Tiffany's talking about moving back to her mother's. I don't know what to do. And then came the question I'd been dreading. The one I knew was coming. "Can you help us?" "Just this once. We just need a little push. I swear I'll pay you back." I looked at him. Really looked. This was my child. My baby. The boy I once rocked through fevers and fears. And in that moment I realized something. No matter how much he'd hurt me, he was still my son. But I wasn't sure if that meant I could give him what he was asking for. Now, I was drowning in choices I couldn't make for him. Yet I stood slowly, walked to the front door, opened it, and said, softly but firmly, "Not today." He froze, blinking. "I'm not saying never," I added, "but not today. Not until you understand what it cost me to sit in this room alone, while you let someone else humiliate me in yours." He tried to speak, but I raised a hand to silence him. "I loved you through every stage of your life. I sacrificed without asking. I gave until I disappeared, and you watched it happen. You let it happen. So now, you'll have to live with the silence you created." A tear slipped down his cheek. "I'm sorry," he whispered. And for the first time in a long while, I believed him, but it wasn't enough. He left 10 minutes later. No slamming door, no stomping, just walking to the car like a man learning how to carry the weight of his own mistakes. That night I cried, but not for him. I cried for the mother I used to be, the one who thought love meant endless forgiveness. That woman was gone, and in her place stood someone new, someone ready to set the terms. 3 weeks passed. No calls, no texts, just silence. But this time, it didn't feel like punishment. It felt like space, like a quiet between storms. A space for him to sit with himself and for me to decide what I needed. Then, one morning, just as I was about to head to the post office, there was a knock at the door. I opened it, and there he was, Brian. His hair was longer, his beard unkempt, but his eyes were different. Not desperate, not manipulative, just tired, honest. "Can I come in?" he asked. I nodded. He sat on the couch again, but not like a stranger this time. It was as if he were asking for the floor beneath him, something solid to stand on. "I started going to meetings," he said. "Gamblers Anonymous, every Tuesday and Saturday." I said nothing. I just listened. I sold the SUV, canceled the credit cards, got a job doing deliveries at night. It's not much, but it's something. "I'm trying, Mom. I really am." I waited. I knew there was more. "I'm scared," he whispered. "We're behind 2 months on the hypotheca. Tiffany, she's angry all the time. The boys hear everything. I don't want to lose them." He looked up at me, raw, vulnerable. "I need help, but this time I'm not just asking for money. I need structure. I need you to teach me how to be responsible, how to stop depending on everyone else." I swallowed hard. This was the moment. The crossroads. I stood, went into the kitchen, and returned with a folder. Inside, there was a payment agreement, a budget plan, a printed list of rehab clinics, and a separation checklist. He opened it slowly. His eyes widened. "What's this?" "My terms," I said. "I'll pay the past due amount on the hypotheca, just enough to keep the house from being taken. One time, that's it. From here on, you're in control of your money. I'll help guide you if you show up. But if you miss one therapy session, one group meeting, or if I catch one charge on your account from a betting site." He cut me off, but I didn't flinch. "If you want this help," I continued, "you also separate your finances from Tiffany completely. No joint accounts. No share cards. You handle your side. She handles hers." He hesitated. "That's not going to go over well," he muttered. "That's your call," I said. "But if you stay tangled in her chaos, I'm out." His eyes darted back to the folder, the agreement, the checklist. His hands trembled, but then he nodded. "Okay." And just like that, I saw something shift. Not forgiveness, not resolution, but accountability. We shook hands. He signed the papers. We set weekly check-ins, my rules, my timing. Then he stood to leave. At the door, he turned to me, his face soft with the realization. "I never realized how much I leaned on you until you stepped away." I smiled faintly. "That's the thing about leaning," I said. "You never realize how much you need it until it's not there anymore. It works, until the person holding you up finally steps aside." He left in silence. I locked the door behind him, and for the first time in years, I felt like I'd won something. Not by saving someone else, but by saving myself. There was still one chapter left, and they still had one final lesson to learn. The weeks that followed were quieter than I expected. Not peaceful, not yet, but quieter. The air remained thick with tension, but there was a sense of anticipation, the kind you feel right before a storm breaks. You can feel the pressure building, the weight of something big about to shift. Brian kept his word, mostly. He showed up for meetings. He stuck to his budget plan. Slowly, painfully, he began to untangle himself from the mess he had made. But it wasn't perfect. Nothing ever is. I could see the strain in his eyes, the way his hands still trembled when he checked his bank account. He wanted to trust again, but trust was a currency he had spent, and it wasn't coming back easily. Tiffany, on the other hand, was not the same woman. She still posted her perfect pictures on social media, but the cracks were starting to show. I could see it in her eyes when she came to drop off the boys. The tension between them was thick, like a wall that neither of them knew how to break. Every little thing set her off. The way he folded the laundry wrong. The way he left his shoes in the hallway. She would snap at him, then retreat to her phone, as though it could block him out. But the most telling moment came when Brian finally told her about his decision to separate their finances. He didn't do it in a dramatic way, like you see in movies. No shouting, no fights, just a quiet, tired conversation at the kitchen table. "I can't do this anymore, Tiff," he said, his voice thick with something I couldn't quite place. "I can't keep depending on you to solve everything. I have to do it myself, for me, for the kids." She didn't say anything for a long time. Then, finally, she spoke in a tone I'd never heard her use before. It wasn't harsh or cruel. It was small. "You're right," she said softly. "I've been waiting for you to fix it all. I thought we could just keep going. But I don't know if I can do it anymore either." They didn't get a divorce then, but something in the way he looked at her shifted. Not with resentment, but with acceptance. He had done what I had asked. He had made the choice to stand on his own feet, and it was hard. But it was happening slowly, one small step at a time. And I didn't offer my help. I didn't offer a shoulder. I didn't step in. I let them figure it out. A week later, I received a call from Brian. It was late. I had just finished a project for my small side business and was cleaning up the kitchen when my phone rang. It wasn't the text I had expected. It wasn't a desperate request. It was just him. "Mom," he said, his voice steady, "I've been thinking. I want to move out." I paused, setting the dish down in the sink. "Are you sure?" "Yeah," he said. "It's time. I can't keep living under this roof like I'm just a guest. I need my own place. I need to be able to take care of my kids the right way. It's going to be hard, but I can do it. I want to do it." I took a deep breath. "You're right," I said, my voice tight but calm. "You can do it. I know you can." I didn't tell him what I was thinking, that this was the moment. This was the first real step toward the future I had been waiting for. Not for me, not for them, but for him, his future. his stability. We ended the call with a promise, not to each other, but to ourselves. He was going to make it. A few days later, I saw him again. He was standing by his car outside a small duplex. He looked different. Not just physically, though he had gained weight and had cleaned up a little, but something else had changed. His shoulders weren't slumped anymore. His posture was straighter. There was a steadiness to him now, like he had found a new strength. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was the one holding him up. He was standing on his own. And in that moment, I realized he wasn't the only one who had been learning to stand. I had been too. There was a quiet strength in him, a strength I hadn't seen before. He had done what I never thought possible. This time, he didn't ask for help. Instead, he held out the keys to his new place, not in a boastful way, but like a man who had earned it. "Mom," he said, his voice steady and clear. "I did it. I paid for this place with my own money, and I'll pay the bills. I'll be a father, a husband, and a son. I'll do it my way. No more excuses." I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. "I'm proud of you," I said, my voice breaking, though I didn't quite understand why. "I wouldn't have done it without you," he admitted, his voice thick with gratitude. "But you didn't just give me money. You gave me the space to find myself again. And that was enough." I hugged him tightly. The warmth between us wasn't born of pity or regret, but of understanding. We had fought this battle for so long, side by side, but never truly together. Now we were both standing on our own 2 feet, and I realized in that moment that I didn't need to save him anymore. He had saved himself. I watched him drive away, the car disappearing down the street. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: freedom. Not just for me, but for him, for all of us. And for the first time in years, I felt truly at peace. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters,